everyone. It's Mxiety. I am on tonight with the lovely Ashley Jaye. Hello, Ashley.
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Good thing you totally weren't here through all the technical issues that I could have pretended never happened, but
Yeah,
they did.
no.
They did. I
I didn't
have
see
to.
anything.
You didn't see anything? Great.
No.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm
Mhm.
glad you looked to the other side while I did that. But Ashley Jaye is a wonderful being, and I met her through SPSM chat. So that's Suicide Prevention Social Media, which she is now the frackin' host of, which is super cool.
Thank you.
But she's also an amazing actress. You wrote your own poems. I'm just gonna let you introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. You'll do a way better job than other than I think you're amazing, and I'm just gonna repeat
Thank
Ashley
you.
Jaye's awesome. She's super amazing. Every conversation I've had with her is awesome and welcoming. And I
Right.
even came to you at one point and was like, listen, I'm really white and don't know enough people of color, and please help me broaden my horizons. You're like, I got you. That was very nice of you. I'm sweating as I'm saying this.
It's
Definitely.
okay.
Okay, cool. Go ahead. All right, introduce yourself.
I mean, honestly, I don't know how to follow up that kind of a bio though. So, I think you pretty much summed me up succinctly there. She's awesome, she's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, and she's
Mm-hmm.
nice. I'm pretty sure that's all anybody needs to know, right?
That's true.
Um,
That's true.
but I mean, if we want to go from just a more, capitalistic standpoint of my successes and goals and my bio there, I'm an actress, as M stated. I'm also a full-time social media marketer at the same time. And I do primarily solo performance. So I create shows based on my experience with my mental health. And I'm diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, depression, and PTSD. So my most recent solo performance show, called Who Wants to Be a Neurotypical Anyway, is about my experience with BPD specifically.
Uh, that okay. So, do you find that during your shows, do you write them as an expression of a way to kind of get it out, or to raise awareness, or all of the above?
Honestly, it's all of the above because I
Okay.
love acting. I love well now I love talking about my mental health now that it's I have a better understanding of it.
Okay.
And then also with BPD in particular, I know there's already just a lot of just negative stigma about it. So just pretty much raising awareness of BPD, of what it's really like to have it, and also just raising awareness for Black folks who have BPD as well.
Which is amazing. I know that there's quite a few disparities. That's the reason I came to you, because I was like, okay, I need somebody who's welcoming and understands that I'm trying to be better. And so, if you could tell me and explain to me, what do you feel like the disparities are in mental health with people who are not people of color versus people of color?
In terms of disparities, I can only really speak from maybe my own personal
Yes, please.
experience and
Yes, yeah, of course. You can't speak
um,
for everybody of your. Yes,
right.
absolutely.
But from stories I've heard from my fellow BIPOC folk, and just from my own personal experience, one of the major disparities that we have is there tends to be this bias when it comes to mental health, especially in the Black community. Um, for one example, is that Black people tend to be overdiagnosed with schizophrenia.
Okay.
And then for Black people too, we tend to be underdiagnosed with mental health just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you look at suicide rates, from a racial standpoint, youth suicide in um, Black and brown youth are rising just serious emergency levels. It rose to a level where Taraji P. Henson, who owns this foundation called the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation for mental health, where she approached the Black Caucus in Congress and just this is a problem. I don't know what to do, but something needs to be done. So those are just some examples of disparities in our community.
Do you have an idea? I mean, again, I know you can't speak for everybody, but do you have an idea of why that's happening? Is there because the British have a stiff upper lip, so that automatically makes it harder for them to talk about it. Do you have any idea of what in the system is creating these differences?
In terms of the system, I know there's already existing medical bias, against Black people, but I can't really speak too much on that. But in terms of like within the Black community, in my experience, what I've noticed is that as a culture, we sort of develop this God's got it or I got it type of mentality, because religion is very strong in our culture. And I myself even grew up in a Christian household. So it was more like kind of pray it away type of thing, you know.
Oh, that never worked. Not one time.
No. And like what doesn't help too is that the history, like Black history, you know, like I come from a long line of like resiliency.
Sure.
And that's something that I speak about in my solo performance as well, that I personally constantly feel like I'm letting down my ancestors in a way for, you know, feeling sad or like feeling angry. Like it's kind of like at that level.
Right.
Yes.
That is a huge way to be like, hey, I'm one person. I have to answer for this long line of people. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But that's how deep it is, because of that like long history of resiliency of what Black folks have been through. We sort of have this idea of like, we can do this ourselves, or we can just sort of pray it away and just keep it moving.
Yeah.
But it's come to a point where it's like, no, we need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's, and I kind of like that is what I suspected. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot easier to say. I mean, this happens in like for Russian culture. This is, you know, how I can relate in some way, which is not, obviously it's not the same, but like in Russian culture, it's very much like, do you know, like your father went through communism and we didn't have like bread, and here you are complaining about nothing, like, because depression, you know, some days depression is literally just like, I feel nothing. And you're like, how could you be complaining about that? How could you be talking about that? So, like, that's one way that I could not get it, but get it.
No,
do you know?
No, that's similar. That's essentially the same thing. That's the same thing. I mean, like, it's within our cultures of just like, if you come from this long history of like of your relatives or just like past ancestors that have gone through just like really difficult periods of time. And then you're in this period with everything's really convenient. You can like press a button and then boom, your food's here. And like everything's so easy and like convenient. People like your ancestors or like your family's just kind of like, what are you complaining about? Everything's like,
right.
Like, it's like, how can you be sad right now?
Right. Right. And then with BPD, I imagine that's even tougher. So I'm going to ask you if it's okay to like kind of maybe give a few more details on BPD, because borderline is something that so just not enough people know about, period. So if you don't mind giving a little bit of a background on the illness as you know it, that would be great.
For sure. So I think someone in the chat asked what BPD was. So BPD is borderline personality disorder. And so I'm just going to use BPD because it's just easier to say. It's just such a tongue twister every time I say it. So with BPD, there's 9 main symptoms, and for you to be diagnosed, or anyone to be diagnosed with BPD, you have to meet, I think, at least 6.
Okay.
And I don't know all of them off the top of my head.
That's
luckily,
okay.
Luckily, I'm not a licensed clinician, so like the board can't like write me up about it, you know. So the symptoms that I remember, so for BPD, there's emotional dysregulation. So essentially like emotional instability. There's suicidal ideation or suicide attempts. There's impulsivity. So whether that be like with shopping, sexual activity, like drugs, alcohol, you know, stuff like that. Then there is also, I'm like slowing down on this. Because there's just so many.
It's totally okay. Again, like I didn't tell you. I wasn't like, hey, Ashley, so there's going to be a pop quiz on BPD, so you better study up.
Oh,
and
no.
if you don't, like literally nobody, can we get some hugs in chat for Ashley? Like nobody in chat is ever going to give you a hard time over not knowing the definition of BPD. It's totally okay. But I think we get the idea that it's, I mean, just the emotional dysregulation alone is not easy. And that is a huge reason for the stigma, because people don't know how to approach somebody who experiences emotions not irrationally, erratically. That's the word I'm looking for. You know, not in a stable manner, literally what the term is. So, and immediately like that raises stigma because people are afraid. And when they're afraid, they assume the worst, right? So do you find that like that creates even more disparity for you because you have this illness that's already not common, and now you're a person of color who's experiencing this illness that not enough people know about? Do you find that like makes it harder in any way?
Yes. There's so many layers to this.
I know.
There's so many layers. Because overall, like if I were to just sum up BPD into like one sentence, it's essentially just emotional dysregulation, so emotional instability.
Right.
So it's essentially thinking in extremes, thinking everything's all good or all bad or all this or all that. It's there's never really any in between. And so in our American society, we don't allow for emotions, honestly. Like we don't give room for that. We don't allow for that. So that's like at like a American society level. The next level, being just in general about mental health, I think we're at a point now where like maybe depression and anxiety is being a little bit more quote unquote accepted and like recognized. But in terms of like BPD and other personality disorders or even like bipolar disorder is slowly becoming more recognizable, but there's still major stigma. Then the next level is for me, I'm Black. So, and I'm also like, I guess the other level underneath it is I'm also a woman too.
You're also a woman, yeah.
And so as a woman, people already see me as emotional. Right. Like they already see that. So they're just kind of like, that's normal. It's just like woman stuff, or she's just on her period.
Oh,
like,
yeah. That's my favorite.
Right. She's just menstruating. Like it'll be fine.
Yeah. No, how can she lead a country? She has her period. Yeah. The whole thing.
Right. And then as a Black woman, what's detrimental there is that there's this myth of the strong Black woman.
Okay.
So which that myth purports that as a strong Black woman, you know, we don't show our emotions. Like we got it. You know, we're resilient no matter what happens to us. Like, oh, someone threw a racial slur at us. Cool, keep it moving. Don't acknowledge your emotions. Like keep it moving. And so that myth is not helpful at all.
Right. Especially if your emotions are in extremes. You're not allowed to have emotions, but all I have is emotions. Lots of them. Right.
That's like all I have is just emotions every hour, every minute, every second.
Right.
And then for that myth to just be constantly like reinforced in like the media, through friends, through family, through intimate partners. It's just that society, culture, and just like even at a micro level, just family and friends don't allow that room for emotions to be shown for me as a Black woman, whether it be like, especially the negative ones. Positive, they're like, great, she's happy, cool. But like if I'm angry, if I'm sad, if I'm frustrated, you know, if I'm
nobody wants to see
depressed,
that.
No, they're like, put that away, put a blanket over your head, stay in bed. You know, come out when you're all happy. Come out when you're
positive again. We like that. We like that a lot. Yeah.
Right. And social media doesn't help either. When it's like when like even like just like celebrities when they're in pain, like Megan Thee Stallion, for example, when she essentially got shot, people were like making fun of her and like memeing her, and she essentially came on Instagram Live and was like, I've suffered trauma. Like this hurts. Like I'm sad. And then everyone was just like, oh, Megan Thee Stallion, need to pick better friends. And I'm like, let her be sad. Let her have emotions.
And the whole Kanye situation is also very similar, where people are just like, well, he's going crazy. And you're like, well, we don't like to use that term because it's super rude and does not help him, by the way, get any better to whatever he's going through. And I actually we talked about it on stream. We talked about, I think Kim did a really good job with her letter on Insta explaining like, yo, it's not easy being a family member for this person. And it's definitely not easier when all of social media is like, isn't this funny? Look at him
Right.
unravel. It's awful. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same goes for Azalea Banks, who's
There you
also
go.
another singer.
Yep.
Black female too.
Yep.
Same exact diagnosis as Kanye, but everybody's treating her like even worse. Like there's no grace for her at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Yeah. People can be hurt and sad. That's impossible. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so you see all of this and you create our Black mental health. So I want to talk about all the things relating to this. So why did you start it? What does it offer users? This is my favorite one. Are white people welcome there? Like all of it. I want to talk about all of it. So go ahead.
For sure. So r/Black mental health is a subreddit that I created on Reddit. And I created it because I was pretty active in other mental health communities on Reddit. So, there's like r/BPD, there's r/depression, r/anxiety. And so I would say I was probably an active lurker in most of them. And maybe like responding and stuff. But I was looking for a space that offered like not only a place to just kind of vent about what's going on in my life, but also a space that offered just resources that can help me. Because in a lot of the subreddits that I was in, it was mostly just a space for like, oh, let's share some memes, let's vent about it, and like get advice from each other, which is helpful.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, well, where can I actually go to maybe get some like skills to like cope with these emotions? Or like, where can I go to like find a therapist or like get tips for like questions to ask my therapist? And like, there wasn't really a space for that. And then not only that, but there also just wasn't really like a space for just Black folks like in these conversations. And so I was like, all right, something needs to be done. And I remember posting in r/BPD one day where I was like, hey, is there any other Black women with BPD here? Because I remember on that particular day, I was just honestly, if I can be authentic, I was just very suicidal that day.
Yeah.
Very.
This is a mental health stream. You can talk about being suicidal.
Okay.
You're good.
Thank you. But I just remember feeling very suicidal that one day when I put up that post in r/BPD, and I was like, are there just any other Black women here with BPD? Because like I'm really struggling and I just feel alone. I just feel alone. And I think at that time, like it was just this, I was kind of going through something that was like racial related.
Okay. Sure.
And so I was just like, just where are my folks at, And then all of a sudden there were like 60 plus comments of like all these women being like, I'm Black and I got BPD, or like Black guys like, yeah, I'm Black, I got BPD. And I was like, oh, so you guys are here. Like, where have you been?
Hi, cool.
Yeah, I was like, you're here. And I was like, this is great. And so I actually started a group chat first, with just everyone that like commented and said they wanted to, talk to each other. And so we had a group chat going for like a good maybe month or two. But then someone was like, hey, our group chat's getting crowded. There's like 60 plus people in here.
Right. It's not really a group anymore.
Yeah. So they're like, we need a subreddit. And I was like, okay, who's going to do it? And they're like, you. And I was like, okay. So that's how r/Black mental health was born.
Awesome. So you just drew the short straw. No, I'm kidding. You're very passionate about it. It's not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And to take your experience, which would normally kind of put you on the fringes of something, and then make it something to unite people over. Like that's resilience. And I feel like not enough is said about that when it comes to BPD. And BPD is a diagnosis that, like you said, is just also thrown on women like willy-nilly just because, okay, well, you're emotional, also emotional dysregulation, BPD, it looks like. And, that may or may not be the case, obviously. Do you ever find, like, what particular struggles with BPD do you feel like have been kind of unique to you, if there are any?
Unique to me. Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Well, so is there something like I don't know. Is there something, so having spoken to, now to a few people who have BPD and depression and are Black like you and all that. So do you find that there's anything that's still like super isolating about what you have? Or do you find that like you found your group, like you're good and people like, I don't know, like do you still feel, can you relate to people? Do you have people you can relate to? Oh my God, Jesus. Okay, I got it. I got it out. I got it out. Okay. Yeah. Do you have people you can relate to, or do you still feel isolated? And are there parts of your condition that you do still find isolating? Yes. Thank you, Bliffle.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Yes, I do feel like I could still relate. But I would definitely say it's harder when I'm talking to just any person with BPD, who's like early in their journey, I would say.
Okay.
Because I'm a little later now. This is maybe like my third, fourth year.
Okay. Of like understanding yourself and the condition and how to live with it.
Right. And some of my doctors consider myself like a high functioning person with BPD. Mostly because like I can hold down a job and so they consider that high functioning.
I've heard high functioning thrown around at me as well. Yeah, it's high functioning. It's, oh, you can get out of bed, you are high functioning.
Right.
And you're like, what do I do with this label? Because if I come to my job and I say this, they're not gonna be like, oh gee golly. Like, it's just, you either have a mental illness or you don't have a mental illness in the eyes of everybody else, right? But like for doctors, there's a difference. That's really all it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I would say what's the most isolating is when I'm not presenting symptoms, that suddenly people are like, oh, well, you don't have BPD because you're not presenting all of the symptoms all at once, all the time. And I'm like,
yes. So I don't have BPD, but there were several people that came at my tweets to tell me that I was lying about my depression because I was, quote, smiling in my profile picture.
Really?
Yeah. Not one. There was three separate people said this. Specifically my profile picture. And I was like, do people just imagine I walk around all day with like leaky mascara and like that's the look.
Right.
That's the depression look. And if you don't look like that, like, I don't know, is there a BPD look? Like, is it also, I feel like there's a lot of running mascara in all of these. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, essentially, what's the BPD starter pack, essentially?
Right.
It's like, do you constantly like troll like forums, or like, are you like constantly like saying, oh, I love you, but I also hate you? Like,
right. I hate you. Don't leave me. Got you. But like, what would a picture of somebody with BPD be like? Like half smiling and half like sad? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, like crying, scars, like
all the time.
I don't know, just
all the time. Yeah. That's the really interesting thing I think about expectations with mental illness, period, is that one, you're gonna recover and you're done. Right? Like you're done with this whole depression thing you were doing, or BPD, whatever, insert and mental illness. This whole thing you were doing, like you're done with it, right? We're back to positive stuff, because I don't really know what to do with this. So I'm going to need you to be positive and be done with it whenever you're ready. And I'll wait for you over here. But I'm not following you until then, because you said the word depression. That's like super scary. It's especially I think guys, I thought I was done with my saltiness for today, but I don't think I am.
Let's continue.
It's continuing. But especially with social media. And I know this is like also off the cuff, but do you find that like there's a person that you're expected to be on social media? Because I find that to be the case.
Yeah, like sometimes I feel like, since people know that I have BPD, that maybe I'm supposed to like tweet about it more, I guess, or just like only talk about BPD, or only talk about like mental health all the time.
Yes.
But I was like, no, like I have a lot of different interests, like I'm an actress, I like video games, like I like TV and film, and I read, like I read more things versus like I read more things than just like medical books,
Oh man, well that won't work. That won't work for mental health Twitter. That's right out of there. Yeah, I got yeeted out of mental health Twitter as well. and moved into streamer Twitter, which I was was surprisingly a lot more accepting than you would
Really?
think. Yeah. Because I find that a lot of streamers want to talk about mental health and want to do it in a safe way. But that's okay, neither here nor there. So what other things, like, so do you feel like, for example, in your relationships, do you feel like there's specific issues that arise? I know there's specific issues that arise due to my depression in my relationship. Do you find that BPD makes certain things more difficult for you as some, because you just got engaged, congratulations.
I did.
I was definitely one of those people that thought you were married, so oops. But you got engaged, and so congratulations. Yes. But and so that's where the whole relationship conversation comes in. Do you find that it's harder?
Yes, I would. Like, I'm actually surprised I even got to this point, because again, like, for me, I would say the number two symptoms for BPD that affect me the most is like the emotional instability and just suicidality. So suicide attempts, suicide ideation, like those are like the most severe for me. And so when it comes to relationships, intimate or not, it's very difficult for me to navigate. Sure. And it's difficult because there was this word that somebody used. Do you know the concept of object permanence?
Yes. Yeah. It's an ADHD thing as well. If I don't see it, it's not there. And it's something that like babies develop, well, toddlers develop at like the age of 4, but certain conditions make it really difficult. It's literally, I don't see you, you must hate me, you're not there, you're never coming back, like all these, all the negative things. Yeah. Yes.
So it's mixed with the concept of object permanence, but instead, like, I've seen somebody else use it as like emotional permanence. So I struggle with that. And so what I mean by emotional permanence is that like, I know my partner loves me. And so like, if we're like sitting together watching a movie, like cuddling, it's like, so in love, yay. But then like, maybe like I accidentally like knock some water over on his lap or something, and he's just like, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, no, he hates me, oh my god, and I'm just like stuck.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, for me, it just overwhelms my body that like, oh my gosh, my partner hates me, he doesn't love me anymore because I spilled this water on him, I don't know what to do. And it's just becomes so overwhelming and takes over my body that I totally forget that, like, yes, my partner loves me, and this is like one small instance of me making a mistake and spilling some water on him, and there are ways to like problem solve through this.
Right. Yeah. And like, you're a person, so sometimes you'll spill water in your lifetime, you will likely spill water, period. All those things. Yeah.
So that's the thing I struggle most with, is the emotional permanence aspect, which is that like, no matter like what I do, this person will still care about me, will still love me. Like, even if I do make them mad, or even if they do get mad at me, or even if they are upset or sad or angry or whatever, they still care for me and they still love me.
Yeah. I find that really hard too. And as far as I know, I've never been diagnosed with BPD, but like, I find that really hard too. If I mess up, that is the spiral of like big time, like, oh, everything is wrong now because I screwed up. So it just sucks. Okay. All right. So how do you find, like, how have you kind of dealt with that? How do you speak to your partner and get to a point where both of you are understanding of this? Because again, like, the other side, like, I'm also married, and I know that it's like, I've said to him, like, well, this isn't easy. I wouldn't blame you if you just checked out. So, but that's not how relationships work. There's compromise and conversations, and then you make it work. So what are some things that you've kind of done to mitigate the effects of BPD in your relationship?
Definitely went through again through DBT, so dialectical behavioral therapy.
We love DBT here. Yes.
So doing that, because I know DBT was originally created for people with BPD.
Yeah.
And so I went through that the first time last year. Now I'm going through it again this year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you ever speak to, and I don't know if you have, but if you ever speak to Dr. Foreman, April Foreman, she on my show, she literally was like, yeah, people can get cured of BPD through DBT, and I like, that exploded my brain. So that's really freaking cool.
Well, I can't wait. So
I'll take it. Yeah. When is that?
Yeah. but yeah, so the skill, I just use a lot of DBT skills, honestly. So a
Okay.
lot of like the mindfulness, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness is probably like the number one thing I use in my relationship with my fiance, is just a lot of interpersonal effectiveness skills. So just making sure that I'm able to like, communicate my feelings, and but also like appear like calm still, and like,
Right.
you know, validate myself and my feelings, and like try not to like explode.
Sure.
um for explode too much, but like validate, yes, you are angry and it's valid to be angry here, but I don't think you need to be angry at a level 100. You could I think you can like lower
Right.
yourself down a little
Right.
bit so that
Right.
you're
Right.
able to like talk with your partner and like work through the situation.
Yeah. Do you mind, and again, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, like I did with the BPD, but do you mind kind of giving a little bit of background on DBT for people who might not know, because people are asking in the audience. Other than it's dialectical behavioral therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and it teaches skills to people to help you. The biggest one is for emotional regulation, and to mitigate the extremes and create like get you closer to the middle, so you're not always on these opposite ends. But I don't know, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so DBT overall, they emphasize what's called wise mind.
Okay.
So they talk about how like everyone has, you know, their emotional part of the brain and then rational part of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And for DBT, they want, their whole model is to connect these two so that you're able to come to more wise mind decisions in the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so to get to that, they have these 4 modules. So mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so through utilizing these skills, you're able to um, accept situations and then also change them. So DBT is all about like acceptance and change.
Mm-hmm.
And they even recognize that there's situations where you can only accept because it's probably out of your control, so you can't
Right.
change anything.
Right.
And then
Radical
there's
acceptance. Yeah.
right, that radical acceptance is my favorite one, and also like the hardest one.
The hardest one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then DBT is also just about working with where you're at and knowing that everybody, including yourself, is doing the best that they can, but that you can
Mm.
also expect for yourself and for other people to do better.
Oh, I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. Personally, I have to understand the thoughts are real, which ones are made up in by sad brain. Oh, I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. I think we've kind of went through all of our questions. So if you guys in the audience have questions, Ashley has gracefully agreed to go through a Q&A. So I am opening the Q, exclamation letter Q. You guys can be part of the conversation by adding, by throwing in questions here. So go for it, exclamation letter Q, and go for it. Let's learn. Let's freaking learn stuff. You have a few questions. Excellent. We'll start with the first one, and then you, because you can only, the system only, it's not my fault, I swear, but the system only lets you put in one at a time. So start with one, and then we'll just go from there. But so how do you find? I want to talk a little bit about, while we're kind of waiting for questions and stuff. If you don't mind, I would love to talk about chronic suicidality, because I know that
Mhm.
that's something that you are vocal about. It's something I dealt with that I'm very grateful. I have learned to move away from. Like, that's not something, I'm shocked because I never thought I would, but I have not experienced that in a quite some time. But I understand that, like, people, continue in that spiral. So how long have you been experiencing it, and how is it affected your worldview and everything else? Because again, you're on the show, you're totally
Right.
functioning, right? Like, again, you're not like laughing and crying at the same time. Like, you're a
Right.
person and you're talking to
Mhm.
me. But I've been there, when you're sitting and you're having conversations, in the back of your mind you're like, I wish I wasn't here at all, like, not here, period. So how do you deal with chronic suicidality, and any details that you're willing to kind of open up about that, on that subject?
Ooh, that's a lot there.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
It's a lot.
I know.
Gave me a lot to answer. Yeah, so I've been dealing with chronic suicidality for a while. And so a lot of my suicidality stems from, I mean, if I want to put it scientifically, it stems a lot, from my fight or flight response.
Sure.
And so on like I guess the biological side, I've went through some trauma, some childhood trauma. And so that's just really sort of placed my flight or flight response out of whack. And so suicide for me is not necessarily like, oh, I want to die right now. It's just more like my brain being like, I'm overloaded and this is the only option for us.
Right.
I'm like out of this situation. And it's based on the trauma that I've had because I was in situations where I was helpless.
Right. Right.
And so that's just kind of where my brain goes. On the personal side, it's still like just kind of every day. My brain still does that. But since I've been going through DBT, it's been a lot less.
Understood.
But every day, like it's always like my brain is saying like suicide's an option.
Yes.
It's not like screaming at me constantly as it was before, but nowadays it's just like, hey, yeah, I noticed you're having a bad day. You ever thought about suicide? Right. Like that's what my brain does.
Right.
So that's like chronic suicidality for me. It's just my brain, like whenever like I'm stressed or if there's maybe something that's like triggering my brain's like, hey, so I know this is like really difficult right now.
You want to just
like we could just like go.
Yeah.
Like we could just
we don't have to be here for this at all.
F it. Yeah. So that's chronic suicidality for me. Like it's just always there. Like it's like never gone. It's just there.
Yeah. I feel that. I don't know if this is not like me showing off and like, yeah, I was the, but really like I have gotten through that and I've come out on the other side where it's been a few months and I've been like, hey, I faced a problem and I didn't think about dying. That's pretty cool. It's a very, I think the self-awareness of it, and like I have a lot of self-awareness of it where it creates this cognitive dissonance where you're like, I don't understand. Your basic body instinct is to live. Everything you do, right? You eat, you sleep, all of those things are to continue living. So for your brain to be super blasé and be like, yeah, but the other option, right? We can just not be here. And so it's very weird. Like there was a period where I was just like terrified of it because I was like, I can't believe my brain would betray me like this. Like how I can't think these things because what if I do them and like out of control and I act on them? But then there's that other side of like, I can't believe I'm thinking these things at all. And then there's the thing where it just like, it becomes such a casual option that's like we're talking about, I recognize that we might be talking about it very casually and I hope it's not triggering to anybody, and I'm sorry. I that's it. Like I hope it's not triggering to anybody. But like when you live through it, you're kind of like it just is. Yeah.
It's honestly a casual conversation between me and my brain every day, every day.
Yeah.
Like even now, like my brain's kind of like, yeah. So after this call, you want to chat about it later? And I'm like, okay, we'll talk later. Like we'll talk later, but just hold off.
Hold on for now. Yeah.
Yeah, like just hold on. Yeah.
But it's sorry. Go ahead.
But it's not. But it's, and I say like casual, as in like if you had to put it on a scale of like 0, like not thinking about it at all, to like 5, where I'm like I'm constantly thinking about it and I have a plan and I'm going to follow through. For me, I'm always at a 1. Like that's like my baseline. Just like
trickling.
That's just, my baseline is honestly 1. And I've even told this with like my therapist. She's like, you never put 0 for suicide ideation. I'm like, it's always a 1. That's my baseline.
Because it's there.
That's honestly my baseline.
Because it's there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was copy pasting a question. So if you guys saw a post-it pop up on the screen, that's why. I'm sorry. I want to make sure we get all of them. Deadsy, I love all your questions, but the system only allows 1 at a time. So you enter one, we'll answer it, and then you can put in the next one.
Hey, Deadsy.
Okay, Cyril asks, how has BPD affected your work life and or school life in the past?
Great question. School, Okay, so I double majored in college.
Oh boy. Okay, so you weren't going through enough.
Um, okay, well, the reason I double majored in college and I was also on the speech and debate team and I was also involved in a couple clubs. So that's kind of how I hid my depression.
Yeah.
Is I overworked myself to the bone so that when people were like, "Why are you so tired?" I'm like, "I have a reason,"
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I dealt with it. As I moved out of college and started working, um, I kind of did a similar thing where I kept like, this was like before DBT, y'all, and like
Mm-hmm.
therapy, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But like I just would just constantly just like take on work and just work all the time, and because I truly believe like, well, if I'm working, and then if I say I'm tired, people won't be like worried about me. They'll be like, oh, she's just tired from work, it's fine.
Right, right. And there's a certain badge you wear, right? Like, oh, they're overworked, they're
Yeah.
doing it, they're hustling. There's a lot
Yeah.
of pride in our capitalist society with overworking yourself.
Yes.
It's considered a good thing. It's a good thing to do for yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like being on the hustle,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
You're just
wake up,
hustling.
hustle every day.
Right. It's not like you're working yourself to the bone because you don't want to do any emotional work and confront your emotions. It's definitely, definitely just because you love working so much. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then nowadays, how it's affected my work with therapy and with DBT, I'm still able to get work done, but it still negatively impacts my work in that
Mm-hmm.
when I'm having like high symptoms. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like just having just severe like emotional instability that day, or I'm just feeling overwhelmed or stressed. It just makes it difficult for me to concentrate, and so I might just have to like talk to my boss and be like, hey, like I need to take the rest of the day off,
Yeah.
because like I can't focus.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm in a meeting, and sometimes like I had a meeting yesterday, honestly, and it was getting tense, like
Yeah.
emotionally tense.
Sure.
And so I had to try really hard just to like appear calm and confident during this thing and not get upset, and just like making sure I just like keep my like emotions together
Right.
so I can get through
Right.
this meeting. And then after the meeting, I just was like, just like like broke
Fell
down.
apart. Yeah.
Yeah, so it still affects me to this day, but luckily I have DBT skills now to sort of manage it,
Right.
so that I don't absolutely explode and get to very severe levels.
Right. Right. That's all. Well, I'm very glad that you're in a better place now. And I'm not so naive to believe that like every day is awesome and like again it's like fixed and good and everything. But like I'm glad you. I guess like you know what the monster is. So like
Yes.
it doesn't mean it just means it's a little bit you're more prepared for the fight. It doesn't mean you don't have to fight. It doesn't mean the fight is easier. It just means you know what to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have skills now. I have like my sword and my shield,
Yeah,
helmet,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I put in the question on behalf of Deadsy. When you were first diagnosed, what was your perception of it? Was it easy to accept the diagnosis?
Ooh, for depression, yes.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
for
everybody's cool
B,
with depression.
right? It was like
Depression's
depression.
cool.
I was like, yes, finally, got it. Got that diagnosis, so now I can be like, look, I have it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's easy, guys. It's just this. It's cool. We're cool.
yeah. But for BPD and PTSD, those are two different reactions. So for PTSD, I literally told the therapist, I was like, no, I don't want it. And they were like, what? I was
You
like,
can't. It's not an opt-in thing.
no. I was like, I don't want that. I don't like it. I don't think it fits. No.
Okay.
Like I
Okay.
can't, like this is not the right shirt. I don't want it,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And then for BPD, they didn't tell me. I actually had to go to my therapist to be like, hey, so I learned about this thing called BPD, and I feel like this fits me better versus just a major
Just
depressive
depression.
disorder
Yeah. Yeah.
diagnosis. And they were like, okay. And then like I talked to my other doctor about it, and they're like, oh yeah, we've already diagnosed you with that.
Oh, okay. You're like, there's a weird thing, and I get it partly, and I feel like there's a whole separate discussion to be had here for sure, and that's on
Oh, yeah.
diagnosis, right? Like, because a lot of doctors do not talk to their patients about diagnosis directly, and like social media is a great example of why not, because people will make that their entire presence and personality, and the only thing, that's, but then other people will use that as a way to explain it to themselves and as a way to learn about themselves and figure out like, okay, I need, like, this is the battle I'm preparing for, so I need these tools, kind of thing.
Right.
But I do find that there's a lot of stigma around just your diagnosis. It's weird.
Yes. And I know with BPD in general, I've heard from other people with BPD that they said their doctor never told them they had the diagnosis, like, at all. And so they would just bring it up and they're like, yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking. It's like, so you weren't going to tell me anything?
Tell me, is that a thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I should talk to a professional about this. Like, is that a thing where, like, is there a reason why you wouldn't tell somebody with BPD they have it? I don't know.
I know one doctor that I spoke to about it.
Okay.
Like, I know for sure there's some insurances that technically don't cover BPD diagnosis.
Oh.
And a lot of DBT like classes and stuff like that are not covered. Like,
Okay.
that's not covered under insurance. So that's why in terms of primary diagnosis, they typically put depression, and then secondary it might be BPD. But but in terms of, they never list it as like a primary because some insurances don't cover it.
Wow. This is where, like, it gets so, like, doctors need to do their jobs, and diagnosing is one of the jobs, and the fact that they have to diagnose to insurance.
Yeah.
Like,
it's all the capitalism.
No, but it just doesn't make, like, I have to diagnose you out of these options, but those are not the options. And the weirder part is we do all this research so that we do have more diagnoses and more understanding of illnesses, and we can break them down into smaller pieces and understand, all the sub-diagnoses and everything. Like, we go through all this work to figure it out, and then insurances are like, no.
Right. Like, we don't want to pay for that.
Yeah. No, that's not a thing. Sorry. That can't be a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself through this process? Asked Dedsy Doll.
Oh, hey, Dedsy. That's my friend.
Aww,
what have I learned?
Dedsy.
What have I learned about myself? I learned that I'm a highly sensitive person. I don't know if you've heard of that term. But so I'm an HSP. That's what I definitely learned, that that I'm just very, why am I losing the word? I'm very empathetic.
Yeah.
Or empathic.
Empathic. Yeah, that's the word. I prefer to say that I'm an empath, because I feel like empath. People, sensitive has so many negative connotations with it. True. Like, people, and I've written a whole piece on it about how, like, sensitive is just a loaded thing. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, sensitive was used as a weapon. Like, oh, you're being sensitive was a really easy way to dismiss just how I was feeling and my emotion. Instead of confronting it and being like, hey, we might be doing something wrong, it was easy to say, no, you're being sensitive. I don't have to own up to what I'm doing. You are broken, basically.
Right. Yeah. So, I've definitely learned that I'm an empath, for sure. And I definitely learned how to stand up for myself more.
Awesome. I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then it also made me, like, through my diagnoses of depression, BPD, PTSD, it's just helped me put a name to what I was experiencing. And so that I was, like you were saying earlier, like, I was just able to know, like, how the tools to use to help myself, so from getting, like, the depression diagnosis, like, okay, like, maybe I should try some antidepressants, maybe I should try adjusting some lifestyle things here, or do this and that, or like get therapy, essentially. And then for BPD, it's like, oh, there's DBT, like, maybe I should try that. And then for PTSD, there's like EMDR therapy, or even like DBT for PTSD. And so, like, just knowing what my options were just gave me more choices, and it just gave me more agency in myself. And it just helped me be able to just figure out, like, what I like, what works for me. Because growing up, I've never really thought for myself, and it's a little bit based because of what happened to me as a kid. So I've just never really thought for myself, like, up until maybe a couple years ago, honestly. And I'm 25 now, so still pretty young, but it's just wild to think that at least for like 20 years I never thought for myself.
No, I'm smiling not because that's good. I'm smiling because I can relate. I remember
Yeah.
the like identity crisis of being like, okay, cool. So I've been doing everything to make you people happy, but
Mhm.
I don't know what that means for me. I have no idea what kind of person I am because I've just dedicated to making sure that what I was whatever you wanted me to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Same. That's
Yeah.
the same exact thing for
Yeah.
me. And that
Yeah.
just ultimately, I'm pretty sure for you too, just makes you unhappy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you don't feel confident in yourself.
You have no idea who you are. So like early 20s was so miserable because I was just like, I don't know what I like. Do I like this job or did I just take it because my parents told me that I had to get a job and this was a
Mm-hmm.
job? Like,
Right.
do I like I don't know if I like it. Should I go try something else? Oh, well, capitalism says you can't just like hop around jobs. So that's not like necessarily an option. It's going to be looked down upon on your resume and there's just like there was so much loaded to it, whereas I feel like the whole point is you're supposed to figure it out as you're growing up as a kid, right? Like
Right.
that's when you're that's that time where you have the space to do that. And if you spent that time pleasing other people, you weren't able to, you weren't able to take advantage. But like the good news is for me, when I figured it out, like I figured it out, and it was also kind of like, oh, I knew it all along. I was just not allowed to be comfortable with what I wanted. So I was always like, oh, this is not what I want. This is not what it's the same way I feel like I recently came out as bisexual. And it was the same
Right.
thing. Like this is something that I want. This is something I believe in, and then it would be like, no, but this doesn't fit the narrative, so I just will reject it and reject it and reject it. And then
Yeah.
you sit back and you're like, okay, but what if I like try the thing that I've been talking about trying this whole time? And then lo and behold, yeah, like I wanted to be a writer since I was 5, and
Yeah. You wrote a book.
I wrote a book. It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. It's pretty cool. Did you
Yeah.
always want to be an actress or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like it's still something that like I high key want to do. But I mean right now it's a little hard.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
but it's still something I like high key want to do, but I
Yeah.
just don't know like exactly what. And then also thinking of like capitalism, how am I going to maintain financial stability?
Oh yeah, yeah,
But I think what I wanted to comment on was what you said earlier about like having like, oh well, did I just take this job because like I need it, or like do I take this job because I actually like it?
right.
What our society as a whole doesn't allow for is to hold two opposing truths. So, and that's
Yeah,
also taught in like DBT too, is
right,
like it's okay to totally like be working at the job and not like it, or only have
right.
the job for money and then also not like it at the same time,
Yeah,
because like emotions are so complex.
yeah.
And I think everyone sort of wants to just kind of put it in a box, and
Mm-hmm.
then like it's like, okay, we don't mix these boxes together, like
Yeah,
they're all like,
yeah.
that's in
No, this
that
goes
corner,
here
that's
and
over
this goes
there.
here. Yep, yep,
Right,
yep,
like
yep.
we don't stack the boxes, we don't like mix the paperwork together, like we don't it's like like this is like we're not doing that, like this is too complex for us to understand, so let's separate everything. And I
Right.
think that's kind of where the root of the problems when it comes to facing our emotions and actually confronting them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, I love you so much. Okay. Rennie Tinkerdork also asked on behalf of Deadsy, how can friends and family be supportive to somebody with BPD?
Ooh. Hmm. Well, it varies person to person.
Sure.
I'll just start that out, so I don't want like everyone running off being like, well, Ashley said this and she has BPD. So like,
I hope that my community is smart enough to not, but I don't know who's watching this later, right? So it's always,
right.
yes, it only
Yeah.
applies to the person who's discussing it, and if it works for you, bonus points. That's how you
Right.
gotta look at it. Yeah.
So I would probably say the number one thing that's helpful is just to ask. Like ask
Mm,
them like, how can I support you? I mean, don't ask them if they're like in the middle of like a suicidal episode or anything,
sure,
but just
sure.
like
No,
you know,
that's
like,
key. That is super
yeah,
key. Is if you know somebody who's not well, ask them, how can I help you, when, like, be prepared
right,
ahead of time.
right. Like essentially ask them, like, well, how can I like best support you? Like, what would be helpful for me for you? Like, how can I communicate best with you? So just asking. And then what's also really supportive is whenever your friend or family member who has BPD is upset, what's really helpful for us is that you validate the current emotion we're experiencing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like
Mm-hmm.
um like if you kind of see us like folding our arms like this and we're just like aloof a little bit, saying like, I notice you're folding your arms, like, what are you feeling right now? Or if we say like, I'm angry, it's like, I understand that you're angry. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, your anger is valid, your
Yep.
sadness is valid, your whatever is valid. Like, just validate that. Like, that's
Yeah.
like should be the first words out of your mouth, because
Right.
that's honestly, like, for folks like us with BPD, like, we just want to be validated, because we already live in such an invalidating society when it comes to like our emotions or just
Mm-hmm.
how we want to just move about life in general.
Yeah.
So just by validating what we're saying to you, especially our emotions, just, it speaks volumes. And I would probably say like those are like the main two, is just asking us how you can best support us, and just validating our emotions.
Love it. Well, I
Yeah.
think that just goes for literally anything in this world, right? Like,
Yeah.
you want to support somebody, ask them,
Yeah.
how do I support you? And then don't argue with them when they're like, I'm angry. You're like, no,
Yeah.
no, if you want to support me, you have to support me while I'm angry, while I said
Right.
I'm the thing that I am. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that though. Twiggy V asks, how has quarantine affected your BPD?
Ooh, how has quarantine affected my BPD?
Mm-hmm.
It's been good and bad, you
Okay.
know, because I like to show the opposing truths here. So
Go for it.
it's been good and bad.
Sure.
Um, the the bad part, I'll start with the bad first. So the con of quarantine and my BPD is that I'm a little bit more stuck in my emotions a little bit more. And then since I can't really go outside to do the things that I would usually do to either like self-soothe or just like calm down, or things that bring me joy like
Right.
outside of my home,
Right.
um, that definitely has had a negative impact on me.
I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys in the chat and you can relate to that as well.
Yeah.
And then another con that's sort of related to that is when I do happen to be going through like a suicidal episode, for example, like I'm stuck. Like I can't really, I mean, I could go outside for like a little bit, like around my neighborhood, but it's not like I can like actually like remove myself like from um my home, especially now because we're going through a major heat wave here in California.
Yeah.
So, and they're like, you shouldn't be outside, it's 110, so
Right.
it's like, where am I gonna go? And then it's the
Cool.
heat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's those are the cons. However, the pros of this quarantine is it's forced, honestly, everybody or everyone who has like the privilege of owning a home, having
Mm-hmm.
access to food,
Mm-hmm.
basic necessities. It's allowed us to be able to like slow down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me as a neurodivergent, like that's just so
Right.
good.
Right.
It's just like everybody slowed down. Like everybody's working from home. And this work from home situation for
Oh,
me
I
and my
love
work has
it.
been, yes, like it's just like I'm not forced into conversations at
Yep.
work. People aren't coming up to my desk to talk to me. And I'm
Yep.
just like, this is like, ah, this is
Yeah. I
great. It's
totally agree.
beneficial.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
I am a ruler of my own time and how I handle
yes.
things. And yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And I just love just being able to, like, I've honestly been able to say no more
Right.
since being in quarantine, because like there'll be people that be like, hey, like, here's an acting gig that we want you to do over Zoom, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Or like here's a thing for work, or like we want to have this meeting in like an hour, and I was like, nope, not available. So I'm just
It's
like,
awesome. Yeah.
I could just like to say like no more, and I'm just like, oh, this is great. Like I actually have a little bit more time for myself too. And
Oh, that's awesome.
and then this quarantine, I would say the number one thing that's been beneficial, honestly, is that it's given me more access to affordable therapists.
Yes,
Period.
this is what I've been
Like,
talking about. We go back and forth about this all the time,
yeah.
which when I talk to therapists, they're like, this sucks. And then I talk to some people and they're like, look, talking to a therapist over teletherapy is literally my version of hell. And I get it. But I'm like, but they're there and they're cheaper in many cases and like all these good things. This is good.
Yes.
This is good. And then telehealth is always going to be an option now, because now that doctors have figured it out, they can lean on it whenever they need it.
Right. And then also, like on the therapy note, like it's just, especially for me as someone with BPD, who needs like, more specialized therapy. So like if you're a person that needs more specialized therapy, whether it be like DBT or EMDR or whatever, like quarantine has made these types of therapists way more accessible. Because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and a lot of the DBT programs here do not accept insurance. Like none of them.
Cool.
And they can cost upwards of like $10,000 for like a year being in that program. I kid you not. That was one program I looked at.
Cool.
Like,
so you can like go get a degree, or okay. Well,
yeah, it was just not accessible. But then since quarantine, it's opened me up to, therapists in like Northern California or Southern California, so they're licensed in the state. And so I'm able to at least like see them via teletherapy and like get the help I need without like the extra cost of like travel and like and just, emotional energy, of just navigating it.
Another one we've talked about, and I think I've been asking literally every guest this. So there, especially people who have mental health conditions, a lot of people, I've heard the feedback of, not a lot, some people have said, you know what, this actually feels comfortable to me. This chaos of I don't know what's happening next, I feel good here because this is normally where I live. Like this matches my head. What's happening inside is happening outside. So have you found that to be the case with BPD too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Because like for me, I forgot to mention this, but another symptom of BPD is like an unstable sense of self. And so I definitely have that through and through. And so being in this period of uncertainty where everybody's kind of forced to slow down and everyone's kind of forced to only live day by day, essentially, and like moment to moment, I'm like, finally, everybody's on my level. Like, I was like, finally, everyone's like kind of experiencing what I'm going through. I mean, of course, not at the same level or capacity, but at least they kind of get some idea of like what it's like to essentially, like, I have to force myself to live moment to moment because of my chronic suicidality as well as my BPD. So it's like I have to kind of like stay in the moment, only think about, okay, like the next minute, the next hour, the next day. Like I like thinking like in terms of next year is like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, it gives me so much anxiety, especially now since I'm engaged. Everybody's like, oh, so when's the wedding? When's the date?
Tell
Did you guys
me about
have a
the
date?
next 5 years of your life. When are you having a baby? Literally, the second I was married, we were packing up the wedding venue, and one of my friends came up to me and was like, when are you gonna have a kid? And she's like half drunk, and I'm like, you are the last person I expected to ask this question. And like, no, I have not planned out. I only got to the wedding part, and now I got to the I'm taking the lights down part. I have not figured out when is the next time I'm planning to have a baby. I'm not there yet. Thank you though. Yeah. Everybody needs to know, man. But that is it's just such easy small talk too, to be like, okay, but when's the wedding? Like, the engagement part's pretty cool. Yeah.
Like, let me just enjoy this.
Yeah. Cyril asks, what are some signs in yourself and other people that might point to BPD?
signs in myself or other people that point to DPD? Is this
To
is this
BPD,
in
yeah.
like is this in terms of diagnosis or?
Yeah, I guess maybe Cyril, maybe you can elaborate a little bit. Do you mean like how can somebody know if they have BPD? Because I don't know that we want to answer that because we don't want anybody to walk away from here diagnosing themselves, right?
Yeah.
Right.
We shouldn't be diagnosing each other if we don't have a license, especially if it's outside of therapy.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
don't.
outside of the license part, and I've even like the license part is irrelevant because if
Yeah.
you are not a if you are a doctor, you still should not be diagnosing anybody. But I also don't like on Twitch. I mean, but I also don't want people, walking away from streams being like, I think I have BPD. Like, do your research, and we will we do research episodes. So if we do a research episode on BPD and we talk about all the symptoms, and you walk away from that being like, oh, I have BPD, I'd rather that than somebody list off their symptoms, that they're personal to you, and you'd be like, okay, I think I have BPD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So sorry, Cyril. I'm sorry. I totally get the question. I just get really ethically uptight about it.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way.
Okay.
Like, I'm like, we shouldn't be like armchair diagnosing each other.
Right.
And you don't want to like assume things because like there are some BPD symptoms that do show up in everyday life for anyone, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that they have BPD.
Right. And that's the same with like any diagnosis. You can kind of read through the ADHD basics and be like, yeah, I'm really distractible. Yeah, I got it. And I've literally heard the phrase everybody's a little bit ADHD like way more times than I would want to, which is like even once would be too many, but like yeah, isn't everybody a little depressive? Isn't everybody a little no.
Yeah, they say the same for BPD too.
Yeah.
And I was like, no.
You want to live in this head? I don't think so. No. BPD, borderline personality disorder, Bruni. I love you. Thank you for asking. That makes me cringe so much. Yeah, but I've heard it. Yeah. Hello, by the way. 99. Thank you. Minimizing your challenges does not make things better. Cringe. Yeah, always cringe. Probably a strange question, Deadsy asked, and I'm gonna close questions on this because we've had all of Ashley's time, so I'm closing questions after these last two have come in. Thank you so much, everybody who's asked a question. But let's get these last few. So Deadsy Doll asked, probably a strange question, but has BPD brought to you any blessings in disguise? Have you had anything positive come from it?
Ooh.
This is always a tricky question, and I love hearing the answers to these because I would love to hear. Yeah, go for it.
Anything positive? I would say it's definitely helped me be able to move out of my parents' house. That's
there
positive.
You go.
And it's definitely helped me be able to slow down more and just sort of reflect on like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Do I want to do this? Like, it's just giving me more questions to ask myself. And it's just pushed me more to do more self-discovery, because like I try not to define myself by my BPD, so I use my diagnosis more as a way to like, okay, how do I like this is how I'm going to be navigating life probably for like the next few years until I get like a grip on my skills and live a more healthy lifestyle. And so through this journey, I've been able to like just improve my relationships just with my fiance and like with my friends. I've improved relationships with like my parents.
That's awesome.
And then I've even gotten like more speaking gigs, related to like BPD and like, mental health. And so I'm just like, wow, this is interesting. Like, I didn't know people would want to hear from me,
I get that. I get that.
Yeah. So it's just allowed me to have more self-discovery and like pushed me to figure out how I can best live the life that I want and like what makes me happy and what works for me.
Awesome. I like that. Surreal asks, has being a person of color influenced how people react to you having BPD and vice versa?
Yes. Wait, what's vice versa?
I don't know. Like, so wait, hold on. So that's Surreal's first language is not English, so I think this is where we get a little bumpy.
Oh, okay.
Has being a person of color influenced how people react to you having BPD advice? Do you do you feel? I think we kind of answer this. Do you feel like because being a person of color, having this diagnosis of BPD, like is different like than it would be for a white person, right, to have BPD? Like, do you think that it's affected you differently? I think that's the question they're asking. Sorry, the other way around.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I think I know
essentially Go with your best guess. Okay.
So I believe the essence of what they're asking is like, has BPD been different for me? Like, does BPD look different for me being a BIPOC? Is that essentially what's being asked? Okay. So I mean, I'll answer it. I'll answer it kind of like what you said about like, is it different, versus being like a white person with BPD, or
Right. And I'm thinking like, is there a different because BPD is already quite discriminated against. So like, right. Is there a different discrimination? Is it Is it harder, less? I mean, you wouldn't know if it's harder or but okay, just answer.
I'll just go ahead and answer.
Just talk.
So I would say on a racial level, and again, race is a social construct. So just like a racial level. So I wouldn't say BPD is like drastically different between like me and say maybe like you, Em, if you had BPD.
Sure.
However, I would definitely say that there's nuances to our experience.
Yes.
And that's a combination of, racial, like gender, environment, yada, yada. So in terms of like the racial nuances with BPD for me is that, one, when I say it, a lot of people don't believe me.
Okay.
And it's a mixture of like, well, like you're doing this success and you have this success and like you look like a strong Black woman who don't need no man. So, like, how can you have this sort of situation going on? That's what like people tend to say is like situation.
Situation. Okay.
Yeah, situation.
Yeah.
So on that level, people don't really like believe me. But also another nuance to it is that as a Black woman with BPD, there is this burden, of strength that I was mentioning.
Right.
Of that, since I do come from such a resilient culture, that to even be here talking about my experience with BPD and chronic suicidality, depression, it can come off as like weak in my culture and even in myself. Like I've still unlearning that sort of like judging thoughts about like, oh well, I'm every time I speak about BPD I must be weak,
Sure.
So I'm like constantly like unlearning that type of thinking that talking about my emotions is a sign of weakness. So I would just say that's like the main like racial nuance to my experience with BPD.
Got it. Okay. I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Yeah, let it all out. I love that. I'm sorry if it was distracting. My room changed color several times because it's on a timer. I love fix that. I should fix during interviews. I really shouldn't do that because I imagine somebody watching it later on YouTube is like, "Is it?" Because they're not reacting to it. Is it changing? Yeah. But you are absolutely lovely. I want to have all like more and more conversations with you about this, and I love that you are so open about talking about the differences in your experience, because I feel like it is And just thank you for being welcoming to me, asking you about the fact that your experience is different, because I think that could be perceived negatively in a way. Like it could be very much like, well, the fact that here's what it is.
Okay.
I got you. It's the fact I got myself. It's the fact that I'm asking you to educate me about what it's like to be you. And that's not your burden necessarily. It's my burden to learn more about. But the fact that you're graciously, explaining your experience and the differences is very helpful. And I'm very grateful for it, because it gives me insight that I would not get by just reading a book or something like that, even though I have picked up literature. I think you recommended me a book. Who recommended me a book? Maybe somebody. It's literally called like Black Mental Health, and I can't remember who recommended. Either maybe it was just like a general like Goodreads or something. Anyway, but yes, okay. So it's very different to read about something and to research something than to have somebody first person detail their story and how their journey is different. So I appreciate it, and I also am not stupid. I don't think that your experience is everybody's experience, but I appreciate having insight into your personal experience. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
I hope all that made sense. Okay.
It did. It did. That was great.
Great. Okay. Woo. We got it. We got here. Do you have anything to plug? Like, plug all the things, obviously, so that her link tree is right there, so you guys could check it out. But yeah, anything you'd like to plug away.
Yeah, sure. So as Em mentioned earlier, I'm the new host of Suicide Prevention Social Media. So there will be new streams coming live in September on Sundays, scheduled to be forthcoming. So make sure to follow us on Twitter, and it's in the link tree. So follow SPSM on Twitter or Facebook to be notified of our live streams. I'm not doing any acting right now, but my solo performances that I mentioned about my experience with BPD and depression are also listed in my link tree on my YouTube channel. So feel free to watch those when you have time. And then I've also plugged in a recent The Mxiety article that I wrote for Depressed While Black and Beam, which are two Black mental health nonprofits. They have a Build a Black Vision campaign going on, which is about re-envisioning like inpatient hospitals for Black patients. So I have an article on the Mxiety talking about my experience in two different inpatient hospitals, and like what it's like being in there.
Neat. Okay, that's really cool. I cannot wait to read more. Thank you, Dedsy Doll, for the biddies. Thank you so much, Ashley Jaye, for being here. Thank you for graciously giving us your time. I hope to see you again soon, either in SPSM chat or you pop back on here. If there's like something else for us to talk about, I would love to have you on. You're absolutely wonderful. And everybody, thank you so much for sticking around for the show and for the interview. Stick around if you would like to see the raid, but otherwise, if you feel like the world is dark and nobody can give you the love and the care that you need, go out there and be that light to others.
Shine on, folks.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. She's got a sign off too. Yay. All right, fam. I'll talk to you soon. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, everybody.